Hello and welcome to another episode of Webflow & Co, where I teach you the underlying code you're writing in Webflow. Welcome to another one of my ever-changing locations. If you didn't know, I'm a full-time nomad and I move around quite a lot. I just wanted to take a moment to welcome all my new followers, because my last video about improving your Webflow etiquette, let's say, people seem to like it. So I just want to welcome you guys. This video is probably going to go out after a couple of other ones that I've already recorded, so it's a bit late, but it's better late than never, of course. So without further ado, let's jump into the code and build our own API that integrates with the Webflow CMS. So I haven't planned this episode out much at all, to be honest. I'm just going to be jumping into it. So it's going to be a little bit of a live coding session. I'll obviously edit it down to make it as efficient as possible. Essentially, we're going to be building an API middleware where, if we describe the architecture of it, you've got your Webflow website and you've got a API that you build that then interacts with the CMS. And there might be a number of reasons why you would want something like that. You could be building your own plugin. You could be just wanting to interact with the Webflow API in your own way. Maybe not through a form, maybe it's through an app on your phone, or the possibilities are really endless when it comes to building your own API. You're just not limited to a form on your Webflow website. But like I say, as you'll see, that we'll be using an application called Postman. So I suggest you download that. And what this will do, it will help us test our API. We'll run our API with an Express server, and we'll get into that. And we'll be hitting that API using Postman instead of building out a Webflow website, because really the Webflow website it's irrelevant to the whole process, really. The point is that anyone that hits this API, and this is a point of security just to remember, anyone can hit this API and start adding stuff to your CMS. But that's not really much different to someone going onto a Webflow website and filling out a form that enters something into your CMS. So there's not a lot of difference there. You'll need Node on your computer installed. You'll need Postman. You will also need a Firebase account, because that's going to be where the thing that's going to host our API. Now, we could run it on an Express server, on a Node server, but these days a lot of this stuff can be done with Firebase functions, which are Lambda functions really, or I think Lambda is the AWS name for it. They are functions that literally just run when you hit that endpoint, or when you hit that URL, that's when they'll run. You can run websites in this manner, but we're going to be running an Express server, and then that's going to be the thing that interacts with the Webflow API. It's worth noting that the reason why you have middlewares like this is because there's an element of security. Now, to be able to interact with an API, it needs an API key. And you might be used to some of that kind of API key nonsense. API keys are to be treated like a password, and you don't want that password revealed on your website that interacts directly with the Webflow API. You want to send your request to something else that has the permission to send it, and then you can do a lot of error checking then within that. Have they sent the correct format of information? Is it from the correct IP address? Loads of different things, and I'm not going to get into all those things now, but you have that middleware that's sort of the gatekeeper of what goes in and out of that API. So let's look into the actual documentation of the Webflow API, because I think it's worth us drawing attention to what I'm referring to, essentially, to just sort of make it slightly less daunting. The first thing we're going to want to do is look at this authentication section, and after reading it, there's Auth2, which is helpful if you're building an app that you're going to sell on some sort of marketplace or something else, and you want to build like a third-party application. But what we're going to be doing is interacting only and exclusively with your specific website, and it asks you to generate an auth key, and you can do that from, if you go to project settings and here integrations, and then you've got API access. Now, I've already generated an API and I have it saved, and again, it really does warn you that you should be treating this like a password. Do not share this with anyone. This will give this one API or middleware that we're going to build permission to integrate with the Webflow API. So that's the first thing you want to do. It says there's an official JavaScript API client, and what this does is give you a bunch of functions you can call instead of you writing what the request is. Now, although this is great, and maybe when we get a bit more familiar with what's going on under the hood, we can begin to use it, but I feel like for not a lot of extra code, we can really see and understand essentially what these functions are doing under the hood. So I'm not really that fussed on using this JavaScript API at the moment, just because for teaching purposes, we might as well really understand what's going on, because there'll be a lot of magic and you'll get too confused, and I'll get too confused, and then we'll end up crying and cuddling on the floor together, wallowing in self-pity. And also, while we're here, then we might as well look at the field types. Now, these are all the different field types, and you'll be familiar with these because you can set these field types inside of the CMS, and it will tell you kind of what the type is and what an example of that would be. So if we're going to be uploading an image or referencing an image of some sort, then we need to provide it a field, a file ID, a URL, and an optional alt tag. So do look into this if you are wanting to, if you are facing issues or something like that, then look into here and think, okay, right, I'm trying to upload an email, and this is what an email should look like. So just as a point of note, worth familiarizing yourself with that, or at least knowing that it's here so that you can kind of refer to it later on. This actually gives us code snippets that we can use to interact with the API. But forgetting about that in the moment, if we look on the left hand side here, we have got everything that's available to us through the API, the different things that we can do in the API, right? So we can look at form submissions, we can list all our sites, we can get a site, we can look at webhooks. This one we're going to be mostly interested in. We've got CMS things here, so we can get a list of collections, we can get a collection, a specific collection. And then this is really where we're going to be digging into. We can list all collection items, we can delete, we can create new ones, we can publish collection items. All of this sort of stuff we can do through the API. So this really is where we're going to be referencing or spending a lot of our time to understand what it is we can do, what the code looks like that we need to write to actually do the thing that we want to do. But you can also test this sort of API and make sure that it's running and all the rest of it. So we're ultimately going to be copying this code, but the real work comes in structuring it for Firebase functions. So with all that aside, let's just start building. This is going to be, yeah, like I say, completely live coding, and we'll see how far we get. Thinking about what we need, we've got Postman downloaded. We're going to want to, I know that we can run a Firebase server locally, so let's just go straight in and start building a Firebase function project. So Firebase function, get started. So in the console, add a project. So let's do that. Webflow API looks good. Google Analytics, let's not do that just because it'll take longer to install, which is installing our project here. We do need to upgrade the plan to be able to use Firebase functions. Now, this is, unless you're doing loads and loads of requests, I have yet to be charged on a Blaze plan. So I'm quite happy to do that. Firebase payment, that's fine. So you want to set up a payment thing and just set it something really small, like $5. Cool. Add Firebase resources to existing, blah, blah, blah. To create a new project, we want to create a new project. Continue, blah, blah, blah. Create project, add Firebase setup, Node.js, and the Firebase CLI. So I have this installed already, but why not? Let's do that. Let's copy and paste that. This is installing Firebase tools globally on our computer. So that's that. There we go. And that means we have access to some of the Firebase functionality. And And then we get to initialize a project. So Firebase login. I think I'm already logged in. And then Firebase login. Everything should be gravy. There we go. Already logged in, but you might be prompted to log in. Now I'm looking here. We don't need Firebase Firestore. This is database stuff. So unless you want that sort of stuff, go nuts. But what we want is to initialize a functions project. Let's do that. Use an existing project. So here we go. You can see down the bottom here, we want to use an existing project. And then it should list out all of the projects we have. Webflow API, there it is. God, don't you love it when technology works? Although I shouldn't speak too soon because I would go JavaScript. I like TypeScript, but this isn't a lesson on TypeScript. Do you want to use ESLint again? It's going to slow us down a little bit. Do you want to install dependencies with npm now? Yes, let's do that. Cool. Git ignore. So there we go. Now this is some basic code for an add message, and let's just demonstrate this real quick. So functions, blah blah blah, and then we're going to uncomment that. And what this means is if we hit our project at the hello world URL, we should see hello from Firebase, but we need to run this as a server first. So here we go, emulate Firebase emulator start. Let's do that one. Cool. So here is our URL. So if I take that, this is just on our local machine, not live or anything like that. And let's open Postman. We're going to create a HTTP request. All we're going to do is paste that into the get function here. Delete that bracket and send. And lo and behold, it's responded. We knock back into our project. You can see that it's responded here. So now we've got Firebase running on our computer, and we can interact with it using Postman. Now it's from within this project that we're going to interact with the Webflow API. So let's start building that out now and do something very, very basic with our Webflow project. So we want to take that API key and store it as a secret in our project so that we can forever kind of access it. So you're going to want to copy your API key. I have my API key copied into my clipboard. So we ran functions config export, which created those env files for us. But if you hadn't done that, you can just go ahead and create .env and then add your API key in there. And then from in here, you go process.env, and then we saved it as Webflow key. So let's just get that. Save. Emulators. Just because of all of this, I'm going to be regenerating my API keys. So you can go nuts with any API keys that you see because they're not going to exist anymore. So with that, we're running this. Looks like everything went through. Great, great, great. And there we go. We have our API key at long last in our environment. And if I deploy this now, it will be up on the cloud server and we can access this from the World Wide Web. So just want to reiterate, you do not want to expose your API keys on the web, and you're also running you're exposing your CMS and any actions to the world. Maybe we can do a follow-up on security, but let's just get through the basics right now. So now we just want to set up a regular Express server, and we can then start knocking back into this and start creating our Express app. So let's turn the emulation off. Let's install Express. So let's start doing this. I'm going to import Express. We want to create an app. We can copy the port here. And start building our routes. Now, to explain this a little bit, basically, whatever our URL is, the root URL, we're going to, and it's a GET request, so we need to specify GET request. And I've gone over this in a in a previous episode somewhere down the line, but we're assigning a GET request to the root of the URL, and as a response we're saying hello world. Now the difference here is that I like to put version 1 there. We need to, instead of this function here, we're going to return our app. Emulate this again. In fact, we don't need the port, so I'll just remove that. Our URL will be updated because we added v1. And because we're at the root here, we're sending a GET request. We should see hello world. Hello world. Boom, boom, boom. We're cooking on gas. We have an Express project running inside of Firebase functions. Now, let's start interacting with WordPress, the moment you have all been waiting for. Now, we're going to need to download Node Fetch because Node doesn't have its own fetch library installed, so we'll do that. And you'll see with each request, we need to apply an authorization. This is basically the default function. So if we just go ahead and add this in, because it's going to be stuff that we always use. In fact, webflow.com, we can just do, we can change that to base URL. Our bearer token will be Webflow _API _key. Now we can make requests to this using good old fetch. So we just copy this here. So const fetch equals require node fetch because we have it installed now. Within here we can, what should we do? I mean, let's just do something basic, and let's list our site. Now we should only see one site because we of course have generated an API key that only associates itself with one site. So and it's simply, the URL is simply sites, or you've got the URL up here, so /sites. Let's just copy that. Let's go sites equals fetch base URL plus sites, and we want to add the options. Now they're using promises. I like async await just because it's a bit cleaner. So if we add async there and go await here, then we want to const site data equals await sites.json. Now we can return site data. We can just return that data here. Every async await should be in a try catch. So let's just do that. Send E and see what we get here. Cool. And there we have it. So we've got an array of our sites, and now we're interacting with the Webflow API. So now let's think about how we should, some sort of best practices and how we want to kind of structure this. So for a start, when we hit the root, we don't want to return that, you know, the sites or whatever. We want to make this into a logical root. So how about, first of all, what we really want to do is kind of match the Webflow API here. So if we get sites, then we want to make our URL get sites. at this point, you're also responsible for the security of the application. So if someone submits a piece of text, or let's say an email, for example, then you want to make sure that you're then responsible to make sure that that email is an email address, for instance. So there's kind of 3 lines of defense here. You've got your HTML kind of input being sort of required, or that it's of type email, but of course those can be very, very easily overridden. So then you've got a second line of defense, which is the JavaScript, and you're interrogating the data coming in from the JavaScript before it's sent here, and we'll get into the JavaScript side of things. And then finally on the back end, you're validating the data again so that you're not sending incorrect data to Webflow, and then they're going to be doing validation on their end. So you can see how important security is when it comes to building backends and applications, because you're starting to dig into the world of that right now. So now we've got kind of everything working. We sort of have these sort of baseline foundational things. Let's actually start doing some basic operations on the collections. Let's set up a route so that we simply list the collection items. We're probably not going to want to use this, but just to kind of get the ball rolling. So if we do app get, which is the type of thing, and this can be post, it can be delete, it can be patch, but we just want it to be get. And then we just call it collections. And we do async res rec. Now these res and rec will contain information about the data that's being sent, but we're not really doing anything like that just yet. So let's just copy this code. So try catch. We want to what are we doing? Collections, and then we'll do collections data, and then going back into here, it is list collection items. Okay, so it's for a specific collection, so we will actually need to provide some data. So let's just copy this and clean it up a bit. So we're going to be dealing with root parameters now, and this is exactly what kind of common convention here. We can get the parameters by doing request.parameters. So making that into a request parameter, we should be able to get it const collection ID equals request.params. Collection ID. Now, the important thing to remember is this route is our route. It's our API's route. When it comes to calling Webflow, we can call any route that we like once we call this one. So just because we've mapped these exactly the same, don't think that this is calling Webflow right away. We're just setting up a route that our API can accept. So we have the collection ID, and if we go into the documentation here, we've got our base URL, and then we've got this here, which we want to stick here. Now we want to do a bit of interpolation here, and we're going to simply replace that with the collection ID that the user has sent into our route. So now we have a new route, and so if we go back into Postman and fire up this URL, items. Now we need to set this up to a collection ID. So where do we get the collection ID from? Well, if we go into Webflow, and I've just realized that I need to upgrade our plan once again to a CMS plan. So if you haven't subscribed already, please do so. It really means a lot, so I can do stuff like this. And if you like the video, that will also help me, because more people get to see it and I get to afford to do things like this for you. So my memory card ran out of space. So just to quickly recap what happened in the meantime is, so I created a collection. We've now got a collection ID, and heading back into our code, we created a route here. We're setting a wildcard sort of parameter there, and we're getting it through the request.params.collection ID, as you can see that those two match up there. And then in our request, all we're doing is putting our variable in the URL that Webflow requires. So if we head back here, list a collection item, we can take a look at that they require a collection item ID. They don't require anything special. It's just a GET request to that URL. Okay, so if I quickly do that, then I can write a request, and then there we go. We can see our collection has got nothing in it. Next, we created a post request, which again matches Webflow's requirement for creating a collection item. So they want a post. We also set up a post. The URL is exactly the same. It's just the request type that differs. So once again, we get that collection item and we pipe it into the URL. There are a few other headings and things like that. For a start, it needs a method of post and it needs a content type of application JSON. So what we've done is we've created a new object here. So by opening and closing the braces, we're creating a new object and we're spreading the existing default parameters, right? And then we're overriding them. So we're overriding the method with post because that already exists there. And then we're overriding the entire headers one, but spreading the existing headers here. So we're getting these two, and then we're adding our content type here. So in effect, we're just overriding things that need to be overridden and adding things that need to be added. Next, we create a body. We pass in a body object, which matches exactly what they require. Where's our body? Updating for some reason. Request example. Here we go. So we need to stringify, because it needs to be passed a string, an object. So here's the object, and it needs to contain a fields entry which matches. If we look at each of our people collection, we've got two required pieces of information here, right? And we can add more as we go along, but for this basic example, we're just going to use the defaults. And when you post something, that data gets sent through the body. And to do that through Postman, we select the forming URL encoded thing here, and we pass in a name of Sam, and that we get that from the request body, and we assign that to our name here. We can actually just remove that to clean up a bit. Now this slug is required, but we do something clever with the name. We take the name, we make it all lowercase, we split any spaces that are in that name and replace those spaces, or at least we join each of those items back up with a hyphen, and then we just send all that to our collection item, collection ID. Now, when I did it first time, it was just setting it up as a draft. I didn't want that. I just wanted it to publish straight away. So you need to set this query param of live equals true. And with all that, we need to post. We can change that to post. So there we go. And you can see that the name Sam is there. The slug is lowercase. Just to show you that it's hyphenating everything, we'll send another one. And there you can see it there. So that's where I got to before I realized my memory card was out of space. So looking back into here, we can also update, which looks like it uses, we need a specific item to actually be able to update them. And then the same with delete. So with that, let's delete. Let's just implement the delete. So it's a delete method, and their method needs to be delete. So let's just replace some of this stuff here, and don't need that. That's the same. And then the URL needs a collection ID, which we have, and then it needs an item ID. So let's accept an item ID, and get that from request params. So item ID. So we're getting those two things, and we need to replace this URL with our item ID. We don't need to send any body. We're literally just sending this. So let's change this now to delete. By the way, inside of Postman, we can create. We don't need to keep replacing this. We can just add a new request. Delete, and then we can name this, save, and then we can name this collection item, and this would be also called collection item. And then we can duplicate that, make it into a post, rename it, but I'm looking at the colors of these to know which one I'm selecting, so we can just do that. Blah blah blah. Try it again. Perfect. Provided ID is invalid. So how do we get that ID? Well, let's go into here and let's look at this one. The ID, there is the item ID there. Replace that there. Deleted. Let's refresh this to CMS, and there you go, it's been deleted. So you can start to see how we're building this up now. But rather than keep on doing the same thing, let's start implementing some sort of protection into your routes. So looking at this, if there's no name, because that's required, then we actually want to respond with please provide a name. And this could help us or the users who are interfacing with our API to actually provide the right thing. So if we post and go to body and we untick the name, so we're not providing a name, we should see please provide a name in the back end. We can go a step further and say, if let's say we want a first and second name. These are very basic examples, so please don't consider this a lesson on validation or anything like that. This is literally just showing you what we need to do. So if name dot split we split a space, if there's no that if there's no that, please, we can assume please provide first and second name as an example. Because it's hitting that and then continuing on and actually making that post request and then collecting again. So okay, so I think it's because of that. Looks good. Perfect. Sam Gregory 7. So it's actually okay, we've got a few Sam Gregorys in there. Okay, so looking at that then, that could be another bit of validation you could do. You can actually you can make sure it's unique by looking for a slug that matches Sam-Gregory. So with that, you could go const. What would we do? We need to get an item. So list remove list collection item. Get the list of items. Collection item data equals await collection item dot JSON, and then we want to loop through all of these for each item, and let's just log that out. Item. And then we'll return that just so we don't send anything. Cool. Sometimes broken, but that's fine. Collection item data. Be careful. Oh, collection item for each is not a function. Collection item data. Okay, let's just log that. I wouldn't expect that to be the case, but I might be surprised. Invalid token provided. Oh. Yep. cool. Okay, so it's an object and then it's items. So in here we go items dot for each. Let's do that. And then we want to look at the name. So if item.name equals the name that we pass, so if they're exactly the same, then we want to return res.send this item already exists. And we want to break out of that for each. So I think let's do something else. Let's it's items, wasn't it? Items. Let's do this. So you can see how we're starting to prevent duplicates here. We're starting to really clean up and make sure we're interrogating the data that comes our way. You could say that you only want a name to be a minimum set of characters. So we're protecting we're not even making a request to Webflow first. We're actually doing our own authorization and things like that before we're sending anything to Webflow. We're at the home stretch right now. This video has been such a nightmare to film. Everything has kind of gone wrong. Space on the memory card. Battery going out on my laptop. It's just been a nightmare. It's literally taken me hours. Anyway, let's carry on with the final topic, which is everyone's favorite, cause. Sorry, fuck that up. Cause. What is cause? It's basically a protection against requesting data between different websites, right? And we want to basically make sure that our website our API, will only accept requests from a specific website URL. First thing we're going to want to do is npm install cause. Okay, simple, straightforward. Then we're going to want to import it, cause, and then we're going to want to use it. Let's do this, app.use cause. Now this in and of itself doesn't really do anything. We actually want to specify what URLs allow from our origin. We allow from our API. So looking at the cause documentation here, we basically enable cause on all requests, which is exactly what we want to do, but we want to configure it from which URLs we accept requests from. So if we just set that to example.com, make sure I've got that. Okay, that's not right. And then if I remember rightly, they also might as well just do that just to be sure. Cause, use cause, blah blah blah, and then close that. Now this will just quite frankly enable cause on every single request. We don't have to do this. According to the documentation, we can actually just do it per function, which is fine, and then we can have different options per function, but for right now we're just going to accept cause on every single function. And if we deploy that now, I've set up inside of just this page I've been working on a basic request to our get sites, which all it does is just return information about the site. It's very, very basic. So that's just a fetch. And if I publish this, is you'll get that classic cause error saying that we're not calls to this URL are not accepted from brandstrategy.webflow.com. So if we copy the URL, paste it into here, if I give this a refresh, we have no cause error, and we're actually returning that data to the front end. And I've done that through just a simple fetch request, so we actually have that data there. So to wrap all this up, we've built our middleware that interacts with Webflow. We control everything inside of this middleware, and it has authentication to directly communicate with Webflow. We can do whatever we want in here. We do form validation, we can do data manipulation, we can do all sorts, and it's completely within our control. We can add things, we can delete things. Anything that's available via the Webflow API, we can activate or communicate within our middleware. It really is up to us of how we communicate with this API, as long as it's from the selected domains that we give it. I hope this gives you a starting point, at least, to start digging into building your own API, having more control over the manipulation of data in the Webflow backend and doing it safely and securely. I would definitely look more into authentication, and I'll hope then to bring another tutorial specifically on the more authentication and bringing more security to it as I learn it myself. Look more into how you can validate the data as well, and think more about, well, what if someone does this maliciously or whatever. That would be really dependent on your use case, so I can't normally answer that really. And have fun with it, really, first and foremost. I mean, just start learning how to create APIs and all the rest of it. I hope this was useful. Join my Discord, because I love chatting to people over there. If you have any questions for me on whatever, please like, subscribe, all the rest of it. And until the next time, happy no coding.